Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Thursday, the Logo Space. Thank you for being early. I'm Chair. I'm here to prop you up. We have some exciting guests today. Excited to get to it. Since we are all here early together, let's get a few things out of the way. First of all, there's a tweet pinned in the Jumbotron, in the highlights, directly above my rabbit head. You must go there now. Click that tweet, like it, retweet it, and use that tweet if you want to ask questions, have feedback, or a comment, or a concern, and you do not have the chutzpah, the gumption, to come up on stage and ask it yourself. Well, you can still ask it yourself, but just as a reply to that tweet. And since there are 10 of us in here right now, there should be 10 likes and 10 retweets. Right? Right. Check your homework in a second. I will be passing it off in just a moment. Waiting for our guests to request to come up on stage. Are you with me, Sterling? Do you see requests from our guests?
I am. I don't think they've made it into the chat just yet, but they should be here any minute.
Okay. Then we will vamp. We will vamp for a moment. Folks, there's a lot happening with Logos. If you click on the Logos logo right there to my, I guess to my left. To my left as I look at the stage. Logos testnet version 0.2.1 is live. If you are a node runner, you need to run new commands as the blockchain is rolling back to zero. Well, it's past zero now. It's probably at like 60,000 blocks again, or maybe a little bit less. I'm setting up my new node right after the space. But there's also a ton to be plugged into, so if you are not following with notifications on the Logos account, you should be. You absolutely should be. All right, things are coming together now. We're coalescing. We're congealing like a meat jelly in the fridge. Some of you know what I'm talking about. Others don't. But if you're curious, yes, you do eat it with horseradish. So a little Slavic cuisine humor for you early in the morning. Maybe it's not morning for you. That's not my problem. Okay. Without further ado, we will formally kick off the show as I pass it to your host, my friend, published author, deep thinker, Sterling. How are you today?
Yo, brother Chair. Thanks for the very kind introduction and invite. Looks like we have Matt and Jason on the stage, so we are set up and good to go. You guys are in for a special treat today. Jason and Matt, I have personally known for over a decade, I think now. And I consider them both friends. We've met up at many different conferences, both anarchist and cryptocurrency events over the years. And they are really doing the Lord's work when it comes to expressing and educating people on our current state of affairs, especially as it regards the surveillance state apparatus that surrounds us, as it regards the police and police accountability, government accountability. These guys have been censored more than anyone I know online. I don't. I'll let them speak to it when they chat here in just a minute. But I think the Free Thought Project itself has gotten removed from various platforms upwards of like a dozen times, maybe more than that. I'll let Jason speak to that here in just a minute. Let me go ahead and go through some disclaimers, guys, so that we can make sure that we all have our prerogatives proper. So number one, Any of the ideas, thoughts, philosophies, or aberrant notions that we happen to share during the course of this space are the products of our own minds and not necessarily associated with the Logos brand or identity. Same thing goes for the Free Thought Project. Gosh, I just said Logos brand. Logos is not really a brand, by the way, guys. It's a movement. To make sure I clarify that for my own correction. Cool. Number 2.
I have a Logos brand. It's made of iron. I put it in the fire. Haven't branded myself yet. If there are any volunteers,
Indeed.
I'm in Mena, Arkansas. We can meet near the airport.
Mena, Arkansas. Gosh, what a place. Cool. Number 2 is if we happen to mention, I love this actually. If we happen to mention any kind of cryptocurrency project or blockchain project, please, for the love of everything holy, do your own due diligence. Do not ape or YOLO into a random shitcoin. If you do so at your own peril. Jeez. Okay. Number 3 is this is a gift space. We have Matt and Jason from the Free Thought Project. We are going to be having a conversation with them, and then we're going to go for about an hour and 15 minutes. At the 60-minute mark, you guys are welcome to come up and ask Jason and Matt questions. Again, I think you're in for a treat, especially if you have, like, if you're anything like me, you know, all of us in the space, a lot of us are focused on parallel societies, exit ethos. We're focused on internet privacy, very, very much like in the weeds. So I personally hadn't spent a lot of time getting to understand Flock. It was just today in preparation for this space where I started looking into it. And damn, it's hard not to be black-pilled when you get into this arena. And so this is the first thing I want to say. Whatever we chat about today, remember this is an analysis. This is stuff that we need to know. There is going to be, it's going to be a critical analysis. There's going to be some kind of quote unquote black pill component of it, but we are going to try our best to get into some solutions as well, because I know most of the people in the logo space care deeply about solutions. Cool. I think I've done enough bloviating. Without further ado, I want to let Jason and Matt introduce themselves. We can start with Jason, and he can talk about the Free Thought Project as well, and then we'll get into what Flock is. Welcome to the stage, Jason.
Jason might have some audio issues at the moment. Oh,
yeah, I'm experiencing
It's
some
good. We
audio
start with Matt,
issues.
if he feels-
My video
if
seemed
he's
to have
ready to
crapped
roll.
out at the same time. Awesome.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, hold on. I'm going to play traffic cop real quick. Okay, so Jason, you are talking in the studio, but the people in the space here on X can't hear you.
Yeah. I'm hearing about three different versions of Echo, and so I'm trying to get that worked on right now. And my video died, so my apologies.
It happens. We might have to go to contingency plan number 1, where we just leave the studio and do just the space. We can still get the recording for everything. But we might, if I say tango, 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 we're just gonna do that. All right. I think we're good now. I think the echo is gonna be gone. Let's Sterling, I'm gonna kick it back to you, and maybe we'll try it all over again.
Yeah, no worries. Does happen sometimes. So let's just go ahead and start with Matt. We'll get going while Jason gets everything squared away. What's up, Matt?
Good to have you here, absolutely. Brother. It's quite ironic that we're having technology problems when we're about to talk about technology that spies on us, right? Yeah, man. So Sterling, thanks for the kind words, man. We have been friends for a long time. I love you, dude. It's awesome watching you work and grow in this space and all the things that you've been doing, man. It's inspiring. I don't have the time that you do to apply myself like that, but it's really cool to watch you and everything that you're doing, man. Yeah, a little bit of background about the Free Thought Project. I mean, we've been around long enough. Everybody's probably heard our story. Jason and I met 13 years ago now and started the Free Thought Project. And we were huge. We were fighting the surveillance state, fighting the police state. We became one of the largest websites, not just like news websites or alternative media websites, but one of the largest websites in the world. We were reaching tens of millions of people a day. And of course, that put us on the state's radar, and they didn't like us. So we got shut down in the most brutal forms ever. We were put on a spreadsheet of Haitian terrorists, and they deleted us from every platform. Well, not every platform, but Twitter and YouTube and Facebook, all within several hours on the same day. And we finally got confirmation of that from Matt Taibbi, the old Rolling Stone journalist who actually interviewed Jason for Rolling Stone after we were banned on that day. We got confirmation that he had all these documents, and it showed that the U.S. government did, in fact, censor us by falsely claiming that we were Haitian terrorists. So at least they weren't spying on us yet, but now they're spying on us, right? So that's what we're here to talk about today, and I'm excited about it. I see this surveillance state as a catalyst for some serious change that is happening right now, with bridging the gap that we've had for so long since 2014, 2015, when this left and right divide started becoming so invasive and pervasive in our lives, and like just being pushed everywhere. I see the surveillance state, that the community hatred for it, as bringing these sides back together in a really beautiful way. And I want to talk about that as well today. But I see Jason's back in here, and I'll shut up right now and let him talk.
I think
Okay,
Jason,
back in here.
yeah, I think he's got an echo. Jason, have you also, you can also right click the tab and mute the tab in the studio. That should help, hopefully.
That's what I did. I muted the tab for the studio.
Yeah, that will probably kill a lot of the echo. Cool. All right, Matt. Yeah, thanks so much. I'm looking forward to getting into the different aspects of this. I think there's a lot to talk about. We can go into depth on the philosophical side as well as the technical side. But let's go ahead and jump into it until Jason gets here. So can you kind of explain what Flock is to the best of your knowledge and current understandings? What I was saying to you guys in our pre-call before we started the space and launched the live video, and what I mentioned here is I don't really know much personally. I just did most of the research now, and from what I see, there's a lot to discuss. There's a lot of different angles, but let's try to get people educated on what Flock exactly is.
Check.
Oh, there's Jason.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, man, you're good.
I'm sorry. I'm having one hell of a time. I've been doing interviews left and right, and this one's proven to be extremely challenging in the first 10 minutes. So here I am, and yeah, my apologies, guys. If you want, I could jump in on that one, Matt.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Jason.
All right. So for the audience who are relatively new to the concept of Flock cameras, they're basically what are called ALPRs, automated license plate readers. They're created by a company called Flock Safety. Flock isn't the only company making them. There's also Axion, Motorola. There's several others, but Flock is definitely the leader in the industry. Now, of course, it's marketed as a safety tool to identify stolen cars, vehicles, and active investigations, stuff like that. But the way I try to generally explain to people, it's like having a police officer sitting on the corner of your block in your neighborhood, taking notes, noting all the different unique identifiers that are associated to your vehicle, things like the make, the model, the color, even if you have dents, bumper stickers, roof racks, stuff like that. And basically what it's doing is it's collecting all this information into a giant database of where you're going, where you've been, how often you go, how long you go. So it knows when you go to the gym, it knows when you go to pick up your kids from daycare, all these types of different things. So there are a couple different types of Flock cameras. The most popular one that most people see is the Falcon. That's the one that's in like the black housing, that's kind of oval shaped, but there's actually other Flock products out there on the market. There's the Condor PTZ, which is the pan tilt zoom. That one has the 24/7 real-time recording capabilities. And then there's also stuff like the Raven mics, which they have set up in quite a few different places, which is basically these gunshot detectors. They also analyze human voice, but it's just like the name of the sounds like. It's a mic basically listening to neighborhoods. So it's not just cameras, it's not just mics. They even have drones that are now hot and out on the market. And these are actually being utilized and picked up by quite a few different police departments around the country. I know the Las Vegas Police Department just picked up one recently. It's basically an autonomous drone that could fly up to 60 miles an hour. It launches from its own dock. It could recharge, it could self-launch, and it could also follow and track license plates God, I can't remember the exact. It's something crazy, like up to like 100 feet away. So it's something where like they could actually be following you or following your car, and you probably wouldn't even know it. So what we're seeing right now is a lot of people, uh, understandably, outraged about the flock cameras that are on our streets, but the ecosystem goes way deeper than that. And so ultimately, all these things are, basically surveillance infrastructure. Please know your movements 24/7. It's basically all these things are tracking devices, and it gets a little bit more confusing when you start talking about the legal gray area here. Is this some type of Fourth Amendment violation? Well, Flock seems to think that they aren't, but there have been a couple court rulings that could potentially cast doubt on that. So we could get into that as well. But ultimately, what these things do, they are claimed to assist law enforcement. But we've also seen other intelligence agencies, alphabet agencies like Border Patrol, ICE, the ATF, FBI, actually illegally abusing the databases and trying to track and gather and surveil and aggregate data using the Flock databases, which is illegal because ultimately the contracts are placed for the local police departments that are contracting with Flock. So we're seeing a huge amount of abuse by both law enforcement. I'm sure if you're online or on social media, you've seen the amount of police officers who are abusing these things. I think the number is up to like around 50 right now. And it's happening like every other day. So it's something that seems to be a serious issue. It's not a glitch necessarily. It is exactly what the system is doing and what it's for. And there are basically everywhere. So they claim that they have about 100,000 of these Flock cameras in about 5,000 different cities. I've talked to people who studied the numbers closer, and they say there's probably closer to 200,000 of them across the country. Flock claims that they're scanning about 20 billion license plates a month, and they've expanded their partnerships to serve over 60,000 campuses. They're also in HOAs, schools, churches, suburban neighborhoods. There's quite a few that have gone up in Home Depot, FedEx, yes, Lowe's, quite a few other businesses. I think the biggest owner of malls in America just did a contract with Flock as well. So, and here's the problem, guys, is that they're not always accurate. There are a lot of real life examples that we could point to that real people have been caught up in some of the algorithm errors. And not only that, it obviously normalizes surveillance, and the public has no consent. So I think, there's quite a few issues with just the things that I've mentioned. Obviously, there's a lot more, but I can rant and rave about this for the next hour. So you guys are going to have to stop me because there's plenty to talk about. I mean, I could keep going if you want.
Well, I'll jump in, Jason. You mentioned the court cases in that legal gray area and how it does violate the Fourth Amendment. And a court has ruled that in 2024, a circuit court in Norfolk, Virginia ruled that the combined data, because like Jason said, these Flock cameras make a profile on you and they track you going around the town. And it's in essence like putting a tracking device on your car. So if the police want to actually put a tracking device on your car, they have to get a warrant to do so. And now they're doing it to millions of people with no warrant. And so that's it's not so much a legal gray area anymore with these court rulings that ruling on the side of the people, right? Not in favor of Flock, which is kind of weird. Usually it goes the other way. But collecting data and tracking individuals on their movements is the same thing as a tracking device. Is what the circuit court ruled in Norfolk. So, and there's countless other examples of this. They had this guy in somewhere Suffolk, Virginia, I believe. His last name is Sovereign, believe it or not, which is kind of cool. He is fighting Flock. He destroyed 13 different cameras and admitted to it, and is fighting on the basis that he was fighting for his Fourth Amendment right. This is what he's declaring in court, that he's he's challenging flock cameras based on their violation of his Fourth Amendment right. So he admitted to destroying the cameras, and his case is going to be one to watch. It's not all the way through the courts yet, but he's moving through right now. So there's a bunch of different legal challenges to this, and they're getting removed from cities all the time. Jason probably has a list of all the cities they've been removed from. Unfortunately, not here. I live in Louisiana, and they just installed 1,000 flock cameras in the state, and they are everywhere. But yeah, it's nothing cool. Like everybody's natural, or not everybody, the boomers' natural to retort to someone who stands up against flock cameras is that, you want children to be kidnapped and murdered and all this bullshit. But in reality, it hasn't really stopped a bunch of that. What it does is it finds people with warrants, largely for victimless crimes. It's racked up hundreds of innocent people mistakenly by identifying them with criminal, or falsely equating them to criminals. So they've had their rights violated based on just the mistakes. They've also had instances where people have gained access to these flock cameras, and they're able to, like, there was one creepy situation where a flock camera, not on the road or anything, just near a public park, a children's park, and it was watching children, and anybody could get on there and have the location and could watch children in a public park from a camera. It's creepy shit. And the resistance is just now growing. A lot of people have been standing up against it for a while now, especially Jason. I kind of had it on a back burner until recently, in the last year, when they started deploying these in my city and in my state. And it's I should have been screaming from the rooftops a little bit earlier, and I kind of regret that. But now, we're full on. I haven't grabbed a Sawzall yet, and if I did, I wouldn't tell you. I'd be out fishing. But it's the resistance is also spreading here in my town. I live in Lafayette, Louisiana, and some guys were just arrested, and they have a whole bunch of support already, but they were just arrested for cutting down flock cameras in Lafayette. So it's pretty awesome. There's the resistance is rising, and I kind of find it very heartening.
Yeah, this is definitely the good side of this, guys. And by the way, thanks so much for educating and help promote these ideas with regard to what's happening right now, because it does sound like, and Matt, I agree with you, like there's probably still a lot of people who don't understand the extent and the scope of this kind of surveillance. So bringing awareness to that, I think, is key, and also awareness to the fact that there is pushback. Something that you guys might not be aware of, I think it's important that I mention this right now. So Logos has a movement apparatus called Logo Circles. I could very easily see a Logo Circle cell in particular communities have an initiative to do what they can to push back against the development and the deployment of these flock cameras and their activities. So I think that is something that's really important, that we have communities in place that actually work to push back against this technology. Something that I think Jason touched on, Matt, you might have touched on as well, that is really concerning, is that this also seems to, like, it exacerbates various kinds of what we can call surveillance misconduct. I guess that is a bit of an oxymoron, right? Because surveillance in general is misconduct. But I was looking at this issue where the police have actually used this to stalk their girlfriend. I think, Jason, you mentioned this, right? What it says here is this is not just a small minority of police officers. Something to the tune of like 50 officers have been charged or accused of misusing these plate readers. And there's 26 cases involving officers spying on their wives and their girlfriends and their exes' partners and the women they wanted to meet. And apparently there was one woman who was queried up to 600 times using these devices because there's no, like, quote unquote legal safeguards in place that prevents the misuse of these cameras. They can literally query any type of information they want, as Jason pointed out. And this is disturbing on a fundamental level. This is like surveillance panopticon to the maximum, and something that we should all work together to find ways to prevent. Like Matt mentioned, I'm really glad that there are people out there actually doing whatever they can to fight back against these cameras. I personally don't even mind that they're getting destroyed. Remember, this is just my personal opinion. I think that these are a net negative, clearly, overall. And the boomer argument, to me, this seems like a similar argument that people leveraged against, like, different I mean, there's always an argument that something is going to be used by the bad people, or like bad people are going to take advantage of the fact that something is, or something is misused. So cameras existing and being massively dispersed somehow being a good or a net positive for society, that seems like an awful kind of argument to make, from the perspective that it's easier to abuse such a technology than to necessarily use it for good. Yeah, Jason, if you have any further thoughts on the, especially on the bit of the surveillance on the girlfriends and wives situation, that's wild.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as I already mentioned, and I think we both said like the 50 number, but I mean, it's quite significant. You know, obviously there's quite a few of these cameras up, and I don't even know if there's an actual ultimate number as far as all the different departments that have contract with Flock, but these stories keep coming out. It's like every other day now. There was one, I believe, in 2024 of a Kansas police chief who used Flock license plate readers to track his girlfriend 164 times, and then her new boyfriend 64 more times over the 4 months. And the problem with this is that anytime that Flock receives this type of criticism, what it does is it kind of flips the script, right? It says, well, this is how we actually know that our systems are working, because we're the people who are helping catch these bad actors, right? So according to Flock, you know, every abuse scandal is basically a success story, which is kind of ironic, you know, and obviously it's just us, the people who see the abuse, that are overreacting. Flock is cool, calm, and collective when it comes to this stuff, because they could just pass the buck. That's what they do. That's what they've always done, and that's what government does. And so it is very much operating in that legal gray area, as we mentioned. And I know Matt also talked about some case law that just came out of the Supreme Court not long ago, but it hasn't seemed to really have too much of effect on Flock's business model. Now, I also want to mention that there isn't really much justification for this, right? We're talking about 20 billion plates that are scanned every month. Now, I was looking into it actually this morning because, you know, obviously Flock is going hard, and they actually just finally recently opened back up their Twitter account so people could comment on it. But doing so, they've also coupled that with a pretty aggressive propaganda campaign where every day they're putting out statistics about how many license plates of stolen cars were read, and how many people that they helped apprehend, and all this stuff, right? And of course, they only provide maybe 3 or 4 links to the sources, and we're just supposed to believe that, you know, 4,000, 5,000, or whatever it is that they're claiming a day is actually happening. But ultimately, the marketing, despite the marketing, what I found is that there's only about a 1%. It's actually less than 1% crime clearance that are related to these automated license plate readers. It's actually closer to 0.3%. So that means that, you know, 99.7% of the surveillance that is collecting is on innocent people. And we got to ask ourselves, is it worth it? You know, is it worth it? Is this something that we're just going to go ahead and, you know, bend over and roll over and say, oh, well, yeah, I mean, the boomers and law enforcement, they're all saying it's for safety. So therefore, you know, we should probably just acquiesce and just accept these things into our lives, even though they're logging, monitoring, tracking our every movement. And I think this kind of gets into some like Marxist socialist theory, you know, about this kind of greater good kind of concept. And it actually transcends even farther into past that, because one of the oldest traditions in our society is the presumption of innocence, right? I mean, for centuries, that has been something that's been the legal norm in free societies. And this whole mass surveillance apparatus kind of reverses that. Now we're all guilty until we're proven innocent. Everybody's watched, everybody's cataloged, all that stuff. And not because they have done anything wrong, they've committed a crime, they've harmed another person. It's because that someday they might do something wrong. And we all know how this works, guys. We, you know, Matt and I have been in the police accountability arena for over 10 years, and we advocated strongly for body cameras. And I'm not going to say that there hasn't been any positive effect to body cameras. There has been a certain level of accountability that's come along with it. But the problem with them is that we don't have any access to this footage. It's always at the police department's discretion when they're going to release it to the public. And that's if it's not already edited. So the idea that this footage and these videos are going to be used just for, you know, our own good, just for safety, for the greater good of society, is complete nonsense. They've actually been used for traffic infractions, and this is something that actually there's in 2023 a real case in Colorado. The police department used the flock cameras to stop a family's SUV because the system flagged it for an expired registration. And because the flock algorithms incorrectly associated a plate with a stolen motorcycle, and this happens all the time, by the way. They'll mistake a 0 for an O or an 8 for a 9. The police actually held this family at gunpoint until they figured out that the vehicle wasn't stolen. And this has happened numerous times across the country. It's not just this one example. I mean, this has happened over and over again. So the tech is far from being very accurate and effective. In fact, it's caused a lot of harm for a lot of people. So the idea that, you know, it's actually doing something to help police is probably arguable. I mean, there is some case uses, of course. They say it's for Amber Alerts and stolen vehicles, but 0.3%. I mean, that's a pretty low statistic.
Yeah, one of the things you pointed out too, Jason, is this idea that in the very near future, and kind of already happening in some ways, is that they're aggregating all of this data, right? Not only through Flock, but also online data. And the aggregation of this data has led into what Shoshana Zuboff in her book Surveillance Capitalism called the acquisition of behavioral surpluses. And what these behavioral surpluses are basically, it's like a pattern recognition game where the corporations and governments actually understand our behavioral patterns better than we do in some sense. So it seems like this combined with flock camera and mass surveillance on every street corner, what this does is create a scenario where they can indeed actually accuse people potentially of committing a crime or doing some kind of wrongdoing before it actually happens. And this also acts as like a post hoc justification for surveilling individuals. And this is something that the state already does, right? Through X-Keyscore, through all of this data surveillance that was unveiled by Snowden, right? This is how the military leverages kill chains to drone bomb people in Middle Eastern countries. And so what this does now is create kind of like a Philip K. Dick-esque Minority Report situation where a person can have a minority report, right? Basically a report that they're about to commit some kind of crime, and then the state can go after them. Of course, they justify this because they have a quote unquote enough data. To me, this is also, permit me to get a bit philosophical, this is also the like an aspect of technology really becoming or being reframed as a totalitarian drive. This was the kind of concerns that Hannah Arendt made in her book on totalitarianism, that there's always a technical component of it because tech can be used to continue to control people, and then that escalates. And it's how communities and cities and states become technocracies over time, is through this process. So I guess the question now, and Matt, you can speak to this, but also let's start thinking about what are the solutions aside from some, you know, radical or activists going out there and actually breaking and destroying cameras, which seems probably that's going to be a limited solution anyway. What else can we do to stop trying to prevent this from continuing to escalate?
Well, just before I go into that, we could look at what's happening because the resistance is already escalating, like I said. And if you go to Facebook, you can go through all different police departments across the country who have flock cameras, including my local one who just did a post. They have these eerily similar posts, right? That they come out there like there's a cop standing next to a flock camera, and they talk about how it stops all these crimes, like Jason said earlier, you know. And when I started seeing these a few months ago, and some of them were basically copy and pasted with the department name changed out. They're like identical. I'm like, man, what is up with that? Well, this week, 404 Media released a bombshell report where they showed that Flock was giving these playbooks basically to police departments across the country called Own the Narrative playbooks. And it had counters and replies and how to make these Facebook posts and what to say. They even like coach them to on the question, like when people bring up the fact that this is mass surveillance, they're like, don't avoid the concept of mass surveillance because you're not going to convince opponents that it's not. right? They admit that it's mass surveillance, but they want them to outmaneuver it by using like these arrest records that are fake and they can't show anything about it. But um, it's a coordinated propaganda attack on the minds of Americans to try to sell them Flock by police departments across the country. And that just shows that they're losing this ongoing war, right? The freedom is winning, although it doesn't look like it with the installation of these Flock cameras, but that's a matter of time. They have a lot of money and a lot of resources, and the boomers on their side who make up all of Congress and most of the state governments. But people are opting out, and multiple different municipalities have already removed them. I can't name off the top of my head. Jason might be able to do that better than me.
I know there's 92.
Yeah, 92 different ones. So yeah, there's a bunch. So the main way that you can defeat Flock is by going to your city council and demanding that they remove them. You can convince enough city council members to end the contract with Flock, and then they remove them. That's these 92 different municipalities have done that. But beyond like the bureaucratic warfare, you can there's a method to put these IR license plate covers. So the ALPR cameras rely heavily on IR light. They have clear IR blockers that you can put over your license plate. So when it tries to take a picture of your camera, it looks normal to the naked eye. But when the Flock camera tries to take a picture of it, it just becomes back distorted or like a big flash on it. There's also DFlock. This group DFlock is amazing. They were labeled a terrorist organization by that piece of shit who runs Flock, and he had to come back out and apologize for it because they're not. Like, it's not terrorist activity to map Flock cameras in towns so people can see where they are, right? So DFlock, basically that's all they do. They organize these events to help people raise awareness to Flock cameras. But what their main project is that they have the exact GPS coordinates of Flock cameras throughout all kinds of towns. So if you really want to avoid Flock, like the most passive way would be to not drive near any of the cameras. So this way you can see maps of them, of where Flock cameras are in your town. Those maps are also useful for those folks who own Sawzalls. Not saying I'm not encouraging people to do that or anything. I'm just stating a fact. These maps are useful in that regard. But yeah, there's a bunch of different ways to defeat this. I think that the sovereign guy I mentioned earlier, that's a brave way. He's risking his freedom to do this. He like I said, he did not hide the fact that he was cutting down Flock cameras in his town, and now he's fighting it based on the state's violation of his Fourth Amendment right. So there's a bunch of solutions. I might be missing some other ones that Jason probably knows, and I'll let him try to fill in for any of my gaps here.
Sure. Well, I think Matt, hit some of the most important ones, including the DFlock option there. Obviously we've seen a lot of people who are up in arms about these things. And, here at the Free Thought Project, we're literally with the motto, by any means necessary, right? We're not going to advocate for you to go out there, but if you do with a Sawzall and happen to take them down, we're not going to be mad at you. I do think there are some better, probably more long-term solutions though. And one of those is just using the power of the FOIA request, right? The PRAs, and being able to really try to question your city, question your city council, and try to ask the questions that are the most important and the hardest for the officials to answer. Has Flock actually reduced any violent crime? Can you produce those statistics for me? Stuff like that. If you could actually start to really delineate where and how these cameras are actually supposed to be, or actually doing what they claim to do, then you're going to have probably a little more room to take them down. Now, also trying to find out when the contract is either signed and when these things go up, or the next time they're renewed is very important. That gives people more opportunity to really fight back and organize and go to their city councils. And I know, the three of us on this conversation generally don't like to involve ourselves with government. I get that, but speaking on the local level, there is actually a lot of impact you could have. There's a lot that you can do to make some waves and push back against them. So it is important that we are involved, as Matt said, with the city council in that process. But using the FOIA requests is just one more way to kind of twist the knife. Now, if you also are interested in doing the city council thing, ask for a privacy review. Some governments will actually spend public money on really looking at the surveillance technology, and they'll actually do an assessment. In some cities, actually, this is mandatory. I think there's only a handful of them, probably more progressive leaning cities. I know Seattle, I think Los Angeles, San Francisco are three off the top of my head that actually require a privacy assessment report before these things even go up. But it's still something that you could ask for and try to demand. Of course, just showing up before the decision is made is really important before these cameras go up, because what we're finding is a lot of times cities kind of keep quiet about these contracts. And just like the data centers, people don't really know what's going on until the wheels are already in motion. Sometimes these things are already installed, they're up in their neighborhoods, and it's much more difficult to get them taken down, than have them initially go up in the first place. So if you can subscribe to trying to find the information as far as when the meetings are for your city, it's probably worth the time and effort. Obviously, just who can search the database? That's another important one. Like who actually has access to this? A lot of times, Flock tells us it's just the contracting police department. But we're finding that isn't the case. There's been a bunch of abuse and misuse by these things. It's rarely the whole picture that it's just the local police department that's using them. Now, you could also request the audit logs. That means when they've searched, the false hits, the error rates, the dates, the users, the reasons for the searches. I mean, all these things are important, and it's all just part of the transparency effect. And then, as I said before, just comparing the crime before and after. I already noted some stats earlier in the conversation, but ultimately, that's the kind of backbone as to why these things are going up. It's always about the crime. It's always about trying to make our neighborhoods and communities safer. But if there isn't any type of measurable impact or improvement, then that gives us all the more ammunition that we need to have them taken down. And taxpayers deserve to know, why they're still funding the programs. There's quite a few other things that we could also do. There's actually 4 different really important watchdog sites as well. Matt already mentioned DFlock. There's one called don'tgetflocked.com. I think it's similar to DFlock, where it helps you map out routes. Haveibeenflocked.com. It's kind of like a quick lookup for whether Flock has actually is watching you, if it's collecting your data. And then Eyes on Flock is kind of like DFlock as well. So what we're seeing is this really natural response from the market to push back against these things. And because, again, there is this kind of legal gray area, it is kind of up to us on like a grassroots level to really push back against these things. Also, there's people who must not have probably have a way too much free time, but there's also people who are just sitting down next to the cameras, holding up poles now, blocking the actual cameras. And I don't know how effective that is, but it just goes to show that people are being really creative when it comes to pushing back against these things.
Yeah. I think one of the good bits that's come out of this is that it does seem like we're trying to achieve a critical mass of individuals who don't really want to deal with this anymore, who are sick and tired of it, who understand that we do live under a surveillance apparatus. So it's good to see that people actually care enough to make a stand against it in various ways. So there is hope. All the websites too are extremely useful. I like the license plate blocker. So I think one thing we can talk about before we move into we're about 15 minutes, by the way, from the question and the answer segment, where you guys, by the way, you can start loading up your questions for Jason and Matt. And here in about 15 minutes, you can come up and ask some questions, and then we'll have them for about another 15 minutes. One thing that we didn't touch on that's worth discussing, we might get a bit philosophical here, but the Logos community will have no problem with that. Let's think about where the mindset, what is the ideology that ultimately creates a situation where the Flock cameras have emerged and this company is so well funded to begin with, right? Because one of the concerns is that even if we push back against Flock, right, we have this critical mass, we stop it, there seems to be like an infrastructure or like an architectonic space where this kind of surveillance technology will continue to be pushed out, right? So from what I can see from reading it, the company Flock has been heavily funded, no less than by Silicon Valley. It looks like A16Z was involved in funding them. Let's see. It has a 275 million Series F closed on March 13th, 2025, and that was led by Andreessen Horowitz. By the way, something that I want to point out as we discuss this, these guys are ostensibly, or at least on a forward-facing sort of quote-unquote libertarian. Obviously, that's false, right? Because Peter Thiel is also involved with these guys. He is, of course, the primary funder for Palantir. Palantir, in my opinion, one of the most evil technology companies to actually exist currently. So all of these capital management firms and funds that are funding this have to, at some point, very obviously be complicit in uplifting and holding this push toward greater technocracy, right? Because this is like a technocratic sort of movement. And so one of the solutions, especially that we have here at Logos, that Jason and Matt, you guys maybe some of the solutions kind of hint at it, is this notion of exit and build, right? And this is also something that our friend Derek is deeply involved with, and that's his solution. You guys follow Derek Brose's work. The idea is that if we don't agree with the systems in place, with the companies in place, with the way that it is all structured, with its architecture, what we have to do is build our own technologies that circumvent these surveillance-based technologies. And this is a form of exit, right? And for those of us who are in a position to do so, exiting physically from these communities that have Flock cameras to begin with is not a horrible idea, right? We have a massive parallel society ecosystem that is starting to grow up around us, where people are saying, I am fucking sick and tired of this current system, so I'm going to leave. I'm going to stand up my own community with people who share my values. This is something that we should also consider as part of the solution space for this. This is not to say we shouldn't be fighting back in our local communities as well. And that's also something, of course, Logos supports very strongly, where we have local initiatives to, whether it's going to the local government or the local community to push back against this, fine, let's do that. But so I think there are a lot of different vectors or avenues that we can take to push back. But I think ultimately the source of this, like the source of these technocratic movement, is what Curtis Yarvin has called the dark enlightenment, right? This is this idea that there has to be a technocratic ruling elite that controls society. So I think this this philosophical principle or this idea is something we have to push back against with like cypherpunk and crypto anarchist countertech, with ideas that are directly opposed to that. Because on the surface, this idea that you need some kind of technocratic elite to rule society because they know best is not a novel idea, but it has been characterized as something that's new and as something that is also libertarian based at its center, right? This is just a bastardization, in my opinion, of the libertarian ethos. So Jason or Matt, whichever one of you guys feel like you want to comment on this part, you can. We have exit and build. We also have the sort of the architecture and the mindset that has led us to be in this position to begin with.
How are you feeling, Matt?
Go ahead, Jason.
Well, yeah, I think you're right. There has been obviously a continuation of the Overton window kind of shifting since the COVID years. And I think there are a lot more people who are just skeptical. They have a profound distrust of authority, government, and all these institutions and corporate talking points that have really kind of led us to this point. And, you know, you mentioned a big one there, Mr. Peter Thiel, right? And, you know, he himself has been involved with so much fuckery, so much of the implementation of the technocracy movement since the Trump administration, the second Trump administration went into place. It's hard to deny it. I mean, we're talking about 30 plus federal agencies now that Palantir has contracted with. There's the DHS-wide data fusion, the health surveillance infrastructure. I think last year around this time, Trump tapped them to make this master database on all Americans. I don't know if you guys remember that. That was like a New York Times piece that was pretty significant. And then, of course, we already talked about this as well, but the law enforcement pre-crime stuff, which Palantir has already been involved with. In fact, I think it was several years ago, but Palantir actually contracted with the New Orleans Police Department to set up a pre-crimes unit without the city government, the city council, or the mayor even knowing. So I think that goes to show just how insidious and nefarious these kind of companies are. And now the Pentagon is making Palantir AI its core military system and giving it control over our food supply with the USDA contract that was just signed. So there really is a push in this direction. I think we're both kind of alluding to that, Sterling, but I don't think that it means that things are done and over and set in stone. I think that we're still seeing signs that this info war continues to rage on. And even the fact that just, I think about last month, Peter Thiel, or at least it was reported that Peter Thiel and his family are fleeing to Argentina and moving out of the US after building this massive empire, the surveillance empire. I think that speaks volumes. I know we already talked about the 92 cities that have canceled contracts with Flock, but there's more than that. I mean, LAPD canceled this Flock contract. I know that a lot of these massive AI data centers are being rejected now. Matt mentioned the Flock CEO, Garrett Langley. And yes, that's his real name, Langley. He actually apologized for calling Flock terrorists. So it does look like there's into the momentum here. And that's ultimately because we continue to stand up, speak out, use our voice, and really highlight the problems and challenges and a lot of the uncertainty that comes along with the surveillance tech. I think we don't always have to beat people over the head with it, but as long as we're asking questions and trying to point out some of these big flaws in, well, logic, statistically speaking, as I was talking about before, as far as the crime rates go. I mean, there's so much that we could point at as far as really just emperor has no clothes, right? This is all just excuses for safety. And that's one of the things, along with convenience and inclusion, that they always try to sell these types of things with. It's always about our safety. I know Benjamin Franklin had that quote, he who would trade liberty for some security deserves neither liberty nor security. I think most people understand that, but there is still enough of a strong enough propaganda push that people seem to be still buying it and believing it. But I think that's shifting. I think that the younger generations in particular understand that a lot of this stuff isn't set in stone and it can be reversed. A lot of it does come down to the market and, voting with our lifestyle, voting with our dollar, and speaking out. So there is, still some hope on the horizon. I don't think we should be completely black-pilled, although we should be vigilant and we should be concerned and we should be watching with a wary eye, because this stuff is moving incredibly fast. It's a whole industry that's been picked up within, I don't know, past 5 years or so. I mean, Flock wasn't around in 2020. If it was just emerging. So yeah, we do have the power through our words and through the apparatus of social media. And so we just have to make sure we utilize it.
Jason, you can't fight it. You have to go with it. That's a Trump quote from 2 weeks ago. Yeah, he said that to people at the Ratepayer Protection Pledge event that he was at when he was speaking about Flock and data center expansion. In particular, when people started standing up against it, Donald Trump comes back in to gaslight them and tell them they need that and they can't fight it and they have to go with it. And I want to be clear here. So some of the solutions we were talking about were going to the government and having the government ban Flock or something like that. That has a bit of like a socialist undertone to it, right? You don't want to use the government to implement any kind of will between two private parties who are voluntarily entering into an agreement together, right? Because two private parties selling property to one another that the other one legitimately owns and vice versa. That's basically that's the American dream, right? That's capitalism. That's what we support. That is amazing, right? But when that deal starts to harm your neighbor, in the instance of say a data center where it dries up the water, or it makes power prices go up, or it starts building a digital panopticon around you with license plate readers on every corner, that is no longer the free market, because there's an externalized cost here that goes on to all people that did not voluntarily enter into that contract with the two parties. And that's what we're seeing happen here. So that anybody who wanted like a free market point against it without trying to use like the government solution of ban and moratoriums and government force or anything like that, it is a direct violation of the non-aggression principle and goes entirely against the free market by externalizing these costs on the people that were unwilling unwilling participants of this entire charade. And
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Sterling.
Sorry, I didn't finish your thought, Matt. Didn't mean.
No, that was it. I was just going to say, like, if we probably don't have time to get into it, but the Flock doesn't exist on somebody's MacBook, right? Like all the data that's collected, all of that goes into AWS servers, Amazon web servers, right? That's all in the cloud. That's what these data centers are being built for. And for those who remember back in 2013, 14, we heavily reported that on the Free Thought Project, how Amazon, these AWS servers partnered with the CIA. So if you think that for 1 second, the CIA is not abusing this data that's collected by these Flock cameras on a minutely basis, right? Then I have some oceanfront property to sell you in Arizona.
1,000,000%. Well said, Matt. One of the things I want to point out too, and this is to help to continue to bolster the optimism and the positivity that you guys have, and I want to just thank you for that. We need as much of that as possible, right? This kind of anti-black pill mindset. It gets really easy to critique the problems that we have in society rather than find solutions, right? Talking about the problems is always easier thing to do rather than act on a particular solution. So thank you guys for doing what you can on the education front and working with people to get all of these solutions in their hands. One of the things that comes to my mind too is that we're in a transformative time period, generally speaking. There's a lot happening at once. And one of the things that has come to my attention is that there is more and more people that are waking up. You guys pointed that out very eloquently during this, but also the fact that governments are massively failing all around the world, right? There's some statistics to back this up. Something like 70% of people are dissatisfied with democracy. Something like 70% plus live under some kind of a authoritarian regime, and the people actually admitted this. So there seems to be a significant amount of people that are saying, no, the system is not working, and they're looking for alternative solutions. And one of the things that's happening as a result of this is that governments are even starting to offload their governance powers to other actors. This is something that Jared Hope and philosopher Peter Ludlow wrote about in their book Farewell to Westphalia. Basically, the Westphalian nation state is in its final innings. The way that I like to describe it is as, you struck the Leviathan with a harpoon. It is now sounding its death knell. It's sweeping its tentacles over the top of the ocean and trying to bring as many people down with it. But now you see governance services being handed off to like other local actors. You see cartels actually taking on more and more governance type services. This is not to say that that's a good thing. It's just to say that government, as it is traditionally founded, is starting to lose its power. And this is like the agonizing last gaps here in this particular century. And I think that corresponds nicely with the fact that we have so many people who are seeing these issues and actually doing things to try and address them. And this is one of the things that's really critical, because we're also in the midst of what John Vervaeke calls a meaning crisis, a crisis of meaning. There's higher rates of depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, and as a result, a lot of suicidality. So people have, up until this point, felt like they've lost agency. But now there is an attempt to reclaim that agency and to be able to take power back into our own hands. And what that means is actually doing the stuff, doing the doing, taking matters into our own hands. And this is, by the way, what Logos has been all about, is actively taking responsibility for our local communities and pushing grassroots activist type movements at the local level to create this kind of change. So I want to thank you guys again so much for coming on and discussing these matters, and also providing attention to these solutions and the people involved in pushing back against it. The system certainly does not win in this particular scenario, with more and more people coming online to fight back against it. Good shit. Cool. So I think Yeah, I'll let you guys respond. And then if there's anybody in the meantime who has questions, please raise your hand. We'll bring you to the stage. Yeah, Jason.
I don't know if I have a response to that, man. I think you said everything that needed to be said.
Yeah, I
Okay.
love the way you framed it. That this establishment, these technocrats are basically in their death throes, and that's why they're getting so desperate. That's why they're increasing all their push for more and more surveillance state on us, because they're trying to topple humanity right now, and we're pushing back, and it's and we're winning, and they're increased, like all of these increased measures that they're doing, they like bypassing Congress, bypassing all these local municipalities that don't vote on this at all. It just shows that they're having to resort to unscrupulous means in order to try to keep their ideas going, because they're not being accepted by the general society as a whole. And I find that incredibly heartening.
Indeed, definitely. We have a chair here, by the way. Yo, brother, you have a question or thought? Feel free to jump in.
Yeah, and anyone that wants to come up, I see a few of you have requested. So anybody that has questions, jump up here, request. We'll get you up here, or reply to that pinned tweet if you are less inclined to come up here. My question is for everyone up here. I happen to be aware that there has been a full-fledged Flock, let's call it Flock Plus system in play in the city that I live in for many, many years. And it's only because I have a relationship with someone who used to be on the city council that I was aware that the drone that you described at the beginning, with the ability, the automation ability that it has, and or like I guess the self, like semi self autonomous drone, as well as the flock cameras, as well as the license plate readers that have been like throughout the entire city for many years. So it's been very interesting over the past few months, if like weeks, it's really intensified. But over the past few months, the greater awareness over flock cameras and just in general what is happening with the mass surveillance in the United States, but really everywhere. Um, what do you make of the timing of this? Like, seemingly, this has been implemented as a test case, or like in cities with enough money or good relationships or whatever, that it's been in play for a while. Like, I think of Phoenix, and Phoenix has been doing for 10 years or more that I'm aware of, catching speeders on their freeways with a similar type of system where you just get a ticket in the mail. I was speeding on the 10 leaving Mesa or whatever, Chandler. So I guess my main question is, what do you make of the timing of this, and like how pervasive is this actually? I get the sense that this is like fully implemented across many jurisdictions already, and there might not be any going back unless there's a really serious movement, which, the president, well, you mentioned with the president's feelings about it a few moments ago.
Yeah, I mean, I see this, the flock is just a tendency of this corporate state society that we've built over the years. You could look back all the way to the Patriot Act, and the government, along with the technocrats, are going to capitalize. And to quote Rahm Emanuel, never let a good tragedy go to waste. So anytime that the government can, and the government and the technocrats that put them into power can expand their capabilities to control the masses, they will. So we saw that with the Patriot Act. We saw that. We're seeing it now because there's this AI boom, and it makes it a lot easier to conduct mass surveillance, and because people don't have to look at it anymore. For a decade plus, we had one single surveillance AI center, which was in Utah. That was built after the Patriot Act, and that was basically gathering everybody's cell phone data across the planet. I mean, in the United States rather, and spying on Americans across. And now you could go another 5 to 6 years in front of that, and then they had Redflex cameras, which were due process violators to the largest degree. They would send you a ticket in the mail and demand payment for that without you having any right to contest it or anything else. But what is encouraging about that is that we saw these municipalities across the whole country push red flex out of here. We showed countless instances of red flex coming into these different city governments and bribing their people under the table to put these cameras in their town, because red flex was making millions of dollars. And not that I have any proof of this, but I bet that we could probably look at and see Flock doing the same exact thing in a lot of these places. And as soon as we expose that, I think that's how we push back at it. You know, like, it's not like they have a new playbook. It's just that there's technology's evolved, and the surveillance state is getting a lot easier with the technology that we have right now. But it also allows us to fight it as well. So I'm not like a Luddite, and I embrace AI, and I think it has its places and everything else like that. But it is also given the technocrats like a huge step up in what they want to do in regards to confiscating and studying all of our data to like herd us like the cattle that they want us to be.
Right. Yes. Great points, Matt. And I think ultimately there is an end goal here. But I think in the meantime, it's just shown to be easier to surveil and track and monitor. And there just happens to be coinciding this whole surveillance tech industry that's blossoming right now. And of course, we know that's pretty ludicrous target market, right? Because we know these aren't necessarily companies that actually have to profit and earn money. These are police departments that extract funds from individuals and taxpayers. And so they ultimately, I don't want to say have endless funding, but somewhere close to it. I know they allocate a certain amount for every year and whatnot. But at the same time, these are, this is a whole industry that's being produced off the back of law enforcement, basically, or intelligence agencies. But the end goal really is to make everything observable, searchable, linkable, to manage populations, and think that's kind of, it's not just the ALPRs, it's the CCTV cameras, it's the phone locations, it's the payment trails, all that kind of stuff. And so ultimately, it is going to be all tracked in the name of safety, efficiency. We were even seeing in the UK the excuse of like climate policy, right? So I don't think we should expect anything less. They're always going to have some type of justification. And Matt's right. There's always the same playbook. It's fear, right? So if it's not fear, it's going to be for your benefit or for your advantage or for the safety of society. But I don't think that we should accept a world that becomes constantly observable. And if you think about people who are catching these felonies for cutting down these cameras, well, you kind of have to ask yourself, what's the return on investment? Like, is it worth it? Is your kids growing up in a panopticon where they can't escape these surveillance cameras that are on every corner? Is that worth it? I know, again, we're not advocating for people to go out there and cut these things down, but there are reasons why people are doing these things because they could see kind of the bigger picture here. And on top of that, there is Atlanta. Atlanta is the most surveilled city in the US, right? Flock, Ring. They have 28,000 integrated cameras across the city. And here's the thing, it hasn't improved the city's crime clearance rates at all. And, no matter how many cameras they have, they're still not going to be able to stop the crime, right? There's more to it than just the deterrent effect, I should say. And, the solution, unfortunately, is always more cameras, more laws, more enforcement, more control, more authoritarianism. But we should be able to kind of see that that isn't going to be a long-term solution. And I think ultimately we are seeing this pushback right now because for the first time in our lives, and I'm in my mid 40s now. We've been hearing about the surveillance state for years, for decades. In fact, I think Snowden came out with his leaks about the PRISM program and all that in 2013. So it's over a decade. But this is the first time that people are actually seeing a visual representation of the surveillance state in their own streets, in their own communities, in their own neighborhoods, right? And they're upset because they haven't consented to these things. They know that there's a multi-billion-dollar company that's profiting and tracking and monitoring, logging their movements. And people certainly don't like Peter Thiel and Palantir, but Palantir isn't on their corner of their block, right? They're not in their neighborhood. So people are pushing back. And it's a very visceral reaction, I say. And I think it ultimately goes to show that America still does have that backbone of rebellion and dissidence that we kind of thought was missing and almost dead there. I think it is maybe a continuation of the Overton window, like I said, with COVID, a part of that. But I think this is kind of like a whole new breed of people who are no longer going to take it, no longer going to accept the fact that they're basically having a prison, a digital prison built around them, funded by their own tax dollars.
Boom, boom, Jason. You hit the nail on the head. This is one of the most perfect comments, my friend. Thank you. By the way, guys, we have Dawn up here, but I might want to make sure we respect time. Do you guys have time for like one more question / round of comments?
Yeah.
Cool. All right, Dawn, welcome to the stage. The stage is yours, my friend.
Howdy, y'all. I appreciate you bringing up the obvious issues in our country at the moment. I find it weird that there isn't another country with this. Like why is it only America that this, like, Apple sells iPhones to every country, it seems. Like everyone's willing to do international business, but Flock doesn't do internet. There's no Flock cameras in Japan. So it's kind of like this weird only America gets to be surveilled. And in my local community, I live in Texas, and in my local community, I find it quite odd that, here in Houston, we have local enclaves, which is basically like a municipality inside of the greater city. And they're able to control their own laws. They have their own police departments. And what I find interesting is every single one of them do not have Flock cameras. So there are literal local enclaves. They are defined legally, and they do not support the Flock cameras. But what's weird is that it's in typically nice areas that have the Flock cameras, and it's mostly like universities and parks and other odd things. Like these are places where like crimes are not high. Like they're not high in the places that they're at. Look in your local communities. You've never heard of high crime rates where these Flock cameras are. So the determination between whether they actually stop crime or not is fundamentally where they're located. And I find it hard to believe that they're stopping any crime at the universities. like there's no crime being stopped. There's nothing being done. It's just an act of surveillance, just for surveillance sake.
Yeah, I want to push back a little bit there. That it's not just the United States at all. In the West, we've been reporting on the United Kingdom and their Orwellian surveillance state that they've been building there for decades as well. Like the cameras on every.
Is it Flock though? The company?
Oh no,
the
no,
specific
definitely
company.
not. No. Flock
Well, that's
is,
what I meant is the international business prospect of making a ton of money. You would figure that these programs would be rolled out internationally. But apparently it's only in the United States that this company that is the largest surveillance state company in the entire world at the moment, who are pumping millions of these devices out and have them in a warehouse somewhere to be deployed, and they're not doing international business. Like Europe would be the first, like you said, they're building this big surveillance state. Europe would be the first on it. So I don't see why Flock isn't in Europe, the exact company. You see what I'm saying? Just because it's called something else and it does the same thing. I just mean in the international business prospect of actually making money and actually pursuit of stopping crime everywhere. You would figure it'd be an international business program, but apparently it's only America.
Well, yeah, I think that America's late to the game in the surveillance state. All these other countries have long instituted this mass surveillance. China, for one, has had 600 million-ish cameras in their country. And so Flock's late to the game. Flock started in 2017 as a means to stop people from stealing packages on porches, porch pirates, and which was a great idea. But you could see the scope creep of that, where people were like, yeah, let's put some cameras up in our neighborhood. And then within just a few years, they're selling tens of thousands of these things. So we're late to the game on the surveillance state. Luckily, we've had our chance at freedom, and now the technocrats are encroaching on us once more. But all these other countries that that don't have Flock is because Flock is late. I want to be the company. I don't want to be the company. I want to know which company owns the 600 million cameras that they sold to China. Do you know how rich that person has to be? Or all the tens of thousands of cameras in the UK that they put there for years. And some of them are so old they have to replace them because they're those big, massive ones. You know, now they could just put the little bitty ones. So the surveillance state's been everywhere. It was largely introduced in Europe a couple of decades ago, and it's been creeping here. And, you know, we've been doing it like, what's the word? We've been doing it like covertly, where we've had to spy on people through their phones and everything else. But now Americans it's just being rammed down our throat by putting cameras on every corner.
Well, I want to kind of circle back to the other thing that I said is that all of the neighborhoods that I see flock cameras in, they're not high crime ridden areas.
Well, part of that is because they also contract with HOAs, universities, private neighborhoods, stuff like that. So, and that actually brings up a really interesting point is that, you know, I'm a freedom advocate. I think all of us on this call are probably freedom advocates. Where do we draw the line, and how do we set guardrails for private owners to actually have these things that are flock cameras? I mean, obviously we've mentioned several times these are surveillance infrastructure in the larger picture, but at the same time, if somebody wants to put one up on their homestead, like who am I to say, no, you can't use this tech, right? So I actually brought this up to my audience and they got a little frustrated with me because they don't want any guardrails at all. They don't want flock to exist, like, period. But I think if there is going to be private use, then yeah, we need to at least have some type of legal boundaries. So therefore they aren't being abused like we've already seen numerous times.
Yeah. So,
Well, that's Ring doorbell, isn't it? I mean,
Hey,
are you going to ban Ring doorbell?
hey, Don, sorry to interrupt you. We're getting just near the end of the space, and I want to be respectful of our guests' time. We should continue this conversation, though, whether it's async or do we do another space and discuss it, because these are really important topics to discuss. I think one of the things that Matt said over here is 100% true, though. Like, just because the specific technology Flock is not elsewhere, like China has one of the most sophisticated surveillance apparatuses with social credit scoring systems that the world has ever seen, which is completely insane. And the UK has one of the highest density levels of CCTVs in the world. So the surveillance apparatus exists. It's just not specifically the Flock technology. Flock, though, definitely has its own strengths with its capabilities with AI that some of the other technologies might not have. So that makes it particularly nefarious in the context of the US. So that's both of these issues are kind of true at once. All right, guys, man, this has been a phenomenal space. We had a lot of folks in here. Some of these folks probably newer to the Logos ecosystem. This is a common conversation that we're having. We're really concerned about the surveillance panopticon that is being built up all around us. We're trying to figure out ways to exit and build. We have local community support as well that Logos provides, as well as a decentralized technology stack, a base camp that people can build on right now. First of all, I want to make sure that you guys do definitely follow Matt and Jason, follow the Free Thought Project, provide material support to these guys if you can, because they're really doing the Lord's work. We need many more Jasons and Matts and many more Free Thought projects all around the world. So thanks again, guys, for being on the show. I want to give you just a second. If there's, you can tell people how to find you and how to find your material, and then we'll close up.
Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah. So the freethoughtproject.com is still our home base, still our hub. We're still putting out about 2 to 3 articles every day there. So check it out. We also do a podcast once a week. We have the most amazing guests, guys. I feel like every interview we do is the best interview I've ever done. That's how enthusiastic I am about it. And we've had Sterling on, I think, at least twice. I'd love to have you on again, brother, one of these days coming up here soon. In fact, we still got to do that network state conversation with both you and Ryan Christian from the Last American Vagabond. We still definitely have to do that. But I'm getting sidetracked here. So jasonbassler.com is my website. I also do a Know Your Rights class. You could find that there. And Matt and myself published a Little Free Thinkers Know Your Rights children's book for kids 6 to 12. So you could check that out there as well. Otherwise, Jason Bassler 1 on Twitter or jason.ebassler on Instagram. Those are my 2 biggest social media platforms. And sorry about the technical issues and everything. I'm even wearing my son's headphones right now. It was one hell of a start there. I apologize, guys. I was a little disoriented, but hopefully you all took something from this conversation today.
Absolutely amazing. Okay. All right, guys, let's keep pushing the movement forward. I want to thank everyone who joined us in this space. Also follow Logos. I want to thank the OGs and people who are regularly in the space. Libertarian Party. I see Lucky Wiz, Uchina, part of the Logos community. Tiger, Rafal we have in here. We got Alisher from the Logos Tech team. We had Polis. We have Aaron in here. We have Odd Name. Man, we have the whole crew fully loaded today. Cool, guys. All right, let's keep pushing forward. We're going to have the Tuesday Logo Circle Spaces as per usual, and then we're going to have Thursday. Just to note, though, we won't be doing any kind of streaming next week, so it'll just be the regular Spaces shows that will happen. So, all right, guys, without further ado, let's